My name is Nadia Calloway. I'm 34 years old. I'm a licensed occupational therapist working out of a rehabilitation clinic in Westerville, a suburb about 15 miles northeast of Columbus, Ohio. I've been doing this work for 9 years. I help people relearn how to move through their own lives after illness, injury, surgery. After the body has been through something that tried to take their independence away. I say that because it matters to who I am. I have spent nearly a decade helping other people reclaim control over their own space, their own routine, their own four walls. I know better than most people what it costs a person, emotionally, psychologically, to feel like a stranger inside the place where they're supposed to be safe. I make $71,000 a year. Not wealthy. Not struggling. Careful. I drive a 2021 Honda CR-V with 42,000 miles on it. Pack my lunch 4 days out of 5. I have a retirement account I have been putting into since I was 26, and a savings account I built from scratch after a financially difficult early adulthood that I don't talk about on the first date. I am the kind of woman who reads the fine print. I married Marcus Calloway in September of 2018. He is 36, a regional sales manager for a medical device company. He is charming in social situations and deeply conflict-averse in private ones. I loved him, and in many ways I still do. But loving someone and being able to count on them are two things I spent too many years confusing for each other. We bought the house in March of 2019. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen with southern-facing windows and a backyard that gets good light from around 2 in the afternoon. Westerville. Quiet street. Good school district even though we didn't have children yet. $319,000. We put down $48,000. I contributed $28,800 of that. 60%. It came from 8 years of disciplined saving, a small inheritance from my grandmother, and one extremely uncomfortable conversation with myself about what security actually meant. Marcus contributed $19,200. His mother helped him with part of it, $6,500, which Sandra mentioned, on average, approximately once every 4 months for the next 4 years. $6,500. That number will matter later. Hold on to it. The mortgage was in both our names. The deed was in both our names. I had a folder in my filing cabinet, organized by tab, labeled in my own handwriting, that contained every document related to that house. The purchase agreement, the inspection report, the title insurance policy, the deed of trust, the homeowner's insurance declarations page. I am the kind of woman who keeps those things. That house was the first place I had ever lived that felt entirely like mine. Not my parents' house. Not a college apartment. Not a rental with someone else's carpet and someone else's fixtures. Built into with my own money, decorated slowly and deliberately, room by room, over 3 years. The navy apron my mother gave me hung on the hook by the back door. Sandra was wearing it when I walked into my kitchen that Tuesday morning. And somehow, that detail, more than anything else, told me everything I needed to know about how invisible I had been allowed to become. Here is what I want you to understand about Sandra Calloway. She is not a villain from a movie. She does not twirl. She does not yell. She does not leave bruises you can photograph. She is 61 years old, retired from 22 years as an office manager at a commercial real estate firm. And she is one of the most quietly effective manipulators I have ever encountered in my life. And I have a graduate degree in human behavior. Sandra operates through assumption. She assumes access. She assumes authority. She assumes that the silence of the people around her is the same thing as consent. And she has spent decades being surrounded by people, including her own son, who never corrected that assumption. So it calcified. It became the operating system of every relationship she was in, including ours. The first time I noticed it clearly, we had been married for about 4 months. Marcus and I came home from a weekend trip to Cincinnati. We had gone for a friend's birthday, 2 nights, left Friday afternoon. When we walked in the door Sunday evening, I noticed immediately that something was different. The living room. The furniture arrangement had been changed. The couch had been moved from the east wall to face the window. The armchair I had angled toward the bookshelf was now pushed into the corner. The coffee table had been shifted 18 inches to the left, and the throw blanket my college roommate had brought me back from Portugal, which I kept folded over the back of the couch, was gone. Folded. In a basket. In the hall closet. Sandra had let herself in with the spare key Marcus had given her, without telling me he had given her a spare key, and rearranged my living room because, as she explained to Marcus later that evening on the phone, she thought the flow was better this way and had wanted to surprise us. Marcus laughed. He actually laughed and said, "That's just how she is, Nadia. She means well." I went and got my throw blanket from the closet and put it back on the couch. I didn't say anything else that night. But I filed it. That's what I do. I file things. The second incident that I'll tell you about happened 18 months later, at Thanksgiving 2020. Marcus and I were hosting. My parents were driving in from Dayton, 2 hours. I had planned the menu, bought the groceries, brined the turkey for 24 hours, made 2 pies from scratch the night before. It was the first time I had hosted a holiday meal in our home, and I was genuinely proud of the spread I had put together. Sandra arrived 45 minutes before anyone else. She walked through the kitchen, lifted every lid, tasted things without asking, and then, standing directly in front of me in my kitchen with my wooden spoon in her hand, she turned to Marcus and said, "I wish she had called me. I could have helped her not over-salt the gravy." Not to me. Marcus. Like I was not in the room. My mother was standing 4 feet away. She heard it. I watched her press her lips together and look at the floor. The gravy was not over-salted. I had 3 people tell me it was the best Thanksgiving meal they'd had in years. But that was Sandra's skill. The comment that lands just below the threshold of something you can directly confront. The slight that is small enough to dismiss but large enough to diminish. Delivered in front of an audience. Precisely. The third example, and the one that, in retrospect, should have been my loudest alarm, happened in the spring of 2022. Marcus and I were going through a difficult stretch. Nothing catastrophic, just the quiet friction that builds when 2 people are both busy and not communicating well. We had started talking about couples counseling. I had actually found a therapist we both liked and we had been to 2 sessions. Sandra found out. I don't know how. Marcus, I assume. He tells her more than I have ever been comfortable with. She called me, which was unusual, she almost never called me directly, and said with that same calm office manager steadiness, "I want you to know that Marcus was perfectly fine before he met you. Whatever problems you 2 are having, I think we both know where they're coming from." Then she said, "I just hope you're not dragging him somewhere he doesn't need to go." And she hung up. I sat with my phone in my hand for a long time after that call. I thought about the spare key, the rearranged furniture, the gravy comment, the therapy call, the $6,500 she mentioned every 4 months like clockwork, the years of small erasures, stacked quietly on top of each other. And I thought, this woman has never once been made to feel a consequence. That was about to become a problem. For her. Let me tell you exactly what those 3 days looked like. Because when I describe it now, from the other side of everything that happened, I want you to understand that this was not a misunderstanding. This was not a cultural difference. This was not a well-meaning woman who got a little carried away. This was a calculated occupation of someone else's life, executed with the confidence of a person who had never once been told no. The rental tables arrived at 9:04 a.m. on Tuesday. 4 of them, feet long each. The delivery men, 2 of them polite, apologetic in a way that told me they had done this kind of job before, looked at me when they came to the door, because I was the one who answered it. "Where do you want these, ma'am?" I turned around. Sandra was already behind me. "Dining room and the back half of the living room," she said. "Leave 18 inches from the wall." They looked at me again. I nodded. What else was I going to do? 'Cause a scene with 2 strangers at my front door at 9 in the morning while still in yesterday's clothes. I called the clinic and rescheduled my 7:30 patient. Said there was a family emergency. That was not entirely a lie. By noon on Tuesday, Sandra had 2 of her sisters in my kitchen. Women I had met exactly 3 times. They moved through my cabinets with the easy familiarity of people in their own home, asking me where things were, My good serving platters, my extra dish towels, my roasting pans, and then not waiting for my answer before they found them themselves. My spice rack was reorganized. My pantry was restocked with things I hadn't bought and didn't choose. Someone put a decorative runner on my dining table that was not mine, in a color I would never have chosen, and it stayed there for 4 days. That first evening, 41 people came. More on Wednesday. By Thursday afternoon, the full 53 had cycled through in overlapping waves. People I did not know sitting on my couch, at my table, in my backyard. Children running through the hallway. Someone's teenage son spilled an entire glass of fruit punch on my living room rug. The cream and sage rug I had bought from a small shop in the short north for $340. And his mother blotted it with a paper towel, looked up at me, shrugged, and went back to her conversation. Cleaned it myself. At 11:30 at night. On my knees. While the party was still going in the next room. Marcus floated through all of it like a man at his own welcome home party. Laughing. Accepting compliments on the food his mother cooked in his wife's kitchen. Refilling drinks. At one point he put his arm around Sandra in the middle of the living room and said, loud enough for a circle of 8 people to hear, "This woman could throw a party anywhere." Anywhere. He said anywhere. I was standing 6 feet away, holding a stack of used paper plates I had just collected from the coffee table. Nobody looked at me. The moment that broke the last of my composure happened on Wednesday evening. Sandra's oldest sister, a woman named Gloria, 70 years old, sharp eyes, pearls at 4 in the afternoon, was holding court at the dining table. I came in to refill the water pitcher and Gloria looked at me and then looked at Sandra and said, loud enough for the table to hear, "Sandra, your daughter-in-law is so quiet. Is she always like this in her own home?" Sandra smiled, tilted her head just slightly, and said, "Oh, Nadia doesn't really do hosting. This is more my thing." Laughter. Warm, inclusive, family laughter. Not cruel. Just completely, utterly erasing. This is more my thing that I in my home. My table. With my water pitcher in my hands. I set the pitcher down. Walked to the bathroom at the end of the hallway. Locked the door. Sat on the edge of the tub for 4 minutes with my hands folded in my lap, breathing slowly the way I teach my patients to breathe when their body is trying to panic. Then I washed my face, unlocked the door and went back out. When the last guest left Thursday afternoon, I opened my banking app. The credit card I had used for groceries, supplies, and the $180 rug cleaning estimate I had already requested. $14,200 and some cents. I showed the screen to Marcus. He looked at it. Then he looked at me. Then he said, "I mean, it was for family, Nadia. What do you want me to say?" I didn't answer him. I went to bed at 7 p.m. and stared at the ceiling for 3 hours. And somewhere in that silence, in that dark, in that house that had just been used and returned to me like a rental car with a full tank of someone else's choices, something in me stopped being patient. 3 weeks passed. On the surface, things looked the same. I went to work, came home. Marcus and I had the kind of conversations that couples have when they have stopped actually talking. Logistical, surface level, nobody reaching for anything real. The credit card bill came. I paid it myself because the alternative was another conversation that ended with "it was for family, Nadia." And I had decided I was done spending emotional energy on arguments I already knew the outcome of. I was not plotting yet. I want to be honest about that. I was grieving. Quietly, privately, in the methodical way I do most things. Grieving the version of my marriage I had apparently been wrong about. Grieving the idea that my home was mine. Grieving the decade of small moments I had absorbed and excused and filed away and never acted on. It was a Tuesday night, 23 days after the feast. I couldn't sleep. Marcus was traveling for work somewhere in Michigan. I got up at 1:47 a.m., put on my robe, and went to the kitchen to make tea. I don't know exactly what pulled me to the filing cabinet. Maybe it was the insomnia. Maybe it was the particular quality of 2 a.m. clarity that you get when your brain refuses to let you rest. Maybe it was the 9 years I had spent in a profession that taught me to look carefully at what is actually in front of you before you decide what you're dealing with. I opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet in our home office. I pulled out the folder labeled House, Purchase Documents, and I started reading. carefully. The way I had not read them since we originally signed everything in March of 2019. Because back then I had been so relieved and excited and exhausted that I absorbed what I needed to absorb and put the rest away. The deed of trust. Both our names. I knew that. The mortgage documents. Both our names. I knew that. Title report. I read through it slowly, line by line, and found something I had not thought about in 4 years. A notation about the source of funds at closing. It was standard documentation. Lenders require it, it's part of the paper trail. But there it was, spelled out clearly in a supplemental letter that had been included with the closing disclosure. The breakdown of our down payment contributions. My $28,800, sourced from my personal savings account, documented with 3 months of bank statements. Marcus's $19,200, of which $6,500 had come as a gift from Sandra Calloway, documented with a gift letter. A gift letter. I set the paper down on the desk. Picked up my tea. Let that sit for a moment. Here is what a gift letter means in a real estate transaction. It means the money is a gift. Unconditional, non-repayable, with no expectation of ownership or interest in return. The lender requires this specifically because gifted funds cannot come with strings. The person giving the gift signs a document stating they have no claim on the property. Sandra had signed that letter. In 2019. Her signature, her date. Her acknowledgement that the $6,500 was a gift with no expectation of repayment and no interest in the property. She had signed away any legal foothold in my home before we had even unpacked our boxes. And for 4 years, she had been invoking that $6,500 like it was a lien. Like it bought her something. Like it was the reason she could walk through my front door, reorganize my cabinets, host 53 people without asking, and stand in my kitchen in my apron telling her son she could throw a party anywhere. She had signed away that power before she ever tried to use it. I sat at that desk until 4 a.m. I read every document in that folder twice. I made a separate list on a yellow legal pad, not her yellow legal pad, mine, of every relevant detail. Contribution amounts. Signatures. Mortgage balance. Current estimated property value based on a Zillow estimate I pulled up on my phone at 3 a.m. $364,000. Equity accumulated since 2019. By the time I went back to bed, I had stopped grieving. I had started calculating. I want to be very clear about something. I did not want to blow up my marriage. I did not want to punish Marcus for his mother's choices. I did not want a scene, a screaming match, a dramatic confrontation that someone films on their phone and posts online. That is not who I am, and it was not what this situation needed. What I wanted was something much simpler and much harder to argue with. I wanted the terms of my life in my own home to be mine. So I did what I do when a situation is complex and the stakes are high. Got quiet. Got organized. And I got help from people who knew more than I did. The first call I made was to a real estate attorney. Her name was Diane, recommended by a colleague at the clinic whose family had gone through a property dispute 2 years earlier. I called on a Thursday morning from my car in the clinic parking lot, 20 minutes before my first patient. I gave her the broad outline. She asked me 4 clarifying questions. Then she said, "Come in Friday afternoon. Bring the deed, the closing disclosure, and the gift letter." I brought a folder with 11 documents. Diane spent 40 minutes with me. She confirmed everything I had already understood from my 2 a.m. reading, and then she added a layer I hadn't fully considered. Because Marcus and I were joint tenants with right of survivorship on the deed, neither of us could take unilateral action on the property without the other's agreement or a legal proceeding. But, and this was the part that mattered, neither could anyone else. No family member, no in-law, no person who had once contributed a gift to a down payment, had any legal standing in decisions about that property whatsoever. Sandra's $6,500 and her signed gift letter meant she had exactly 0 legal footing inside my home. "What she's been doing," Diane said calmly, looking at my notes, "is operating on assumption. There's nothing legally enforceable backing any of it." I asked Diane what my options were if I wanted to formalize boundaries around the property. specifically around who could access it and under what circumstances. She walked me through 3 of them. I left her office with a legal pad full of notes, a $200 consultation invoice I paid in cash, and a very clear picture of the board I was playing on. The second thing I did was call my bank. The credit card I had used for the feast expenses, $14,200, was a joint card, meaning Marcus was also a cardholder. I spoke to a representative and asked about the process for separating the account or transitioning to a sole account. I gathered the information. I didn't act yet. Not yet. I needed to understand the full picture before I moved any piece. I am a careful person. I have always been a careful person. The third thing I did was documentation. Over the following 6 weeks, I kept a private log. Dates, times, incidents, quotes where I remembered them exactly. Tuesday morning. The Thanksgiving gravy comment. The therapy phone call in 2022. The feast, itemized. Every grocery receipt I had saved, photographed and stored in a folder on my phone. The $340 rug. The $180 cleaning estimate. The $14,200 total. Time-stamped photos of the state of my home on the final day of the feast. Dishes piled, runners still on my table, someone's jacket left on my armchair, trash bags full in the kitchen. I had been a careful person my whole life. Now I was using that carefulness as a weapon. The fourth thing I did was have a conversation with Marcus. Not a fight. Conversation. Deliberate, measured. At the kitchen table on a Sunday morning when neither of us had anywhere to be. I told him without raising my voice that the feast had cost $14,200 that I had paid alone. I told him that I needed that money returned to our household account within 60 days. I told him that going forward, no gatherings of more than 6 people would be held in our home without both of us agreeing in writing. By text was fine, I wasn't being dramatic, I just needed a record. He stared at me. In writing. Nadia, that's. I paid $14,000 to feed 53 people I didn't invite, I said. A text message is a very reasonable ask. He didn't respond. I looked at him for a long, quiet moment. Then I said, I need you to hear me, Marcus. I am not asking you to choose between me and your mother. I am asking you to acknowledge that I live here too. He said he would think about it. He nodded. I cleared my cup from the table. And I went to water my plants on the back porch because it was a Sunday and the light was good and I had done what I needed to do in that conversation. He had 60 days. The clock was running. And Sandra, 12 miles away in her house on the other side of Columbus, had absolutely no idea. The call came on a Saturday morning in November. I was in the backyard with my second cup of coffee, wearing my old college sweatshirt, watching the light move across the grass the way it does in Ohio in autumn, low and golden and a little melancholy. My phone buzzed on the patio table. I looked at the screen. Sandra Calloway. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. Nadia. Her voice was warm, familiar, completely unbothered. The voice of a woman who had never once experienced a consequence in this relationship. I wanted to talk to you about December. I'm thinking the 27th. I've already reached out to a few people and they're excited. Same setup as before. I'll handle the food, you don't need to do anything. Just make sure the living room is clear. Just make sure the living room is cleared at in my house. I let her finish. Then I said, calmly and clearly, Sandra, I need to let you know that we won't be hosting any gatherings at our home in December, or in the foreseeable future without a prior conversation between all 3 of us. You, me, and Marcus, at least 30 days in advance. Silence. Excuse me. The October gathering cost $14,200. That money came out of my personal credit card. I have not received any contribution toward that cost. And Marcus and I are still in conversation about how that gets resolved. Until it is resolved, and until we have a clear agreement about how future gatherings are organized and funded, the house is not available. More silence. A different kind this time. I don't know what Marcus has been telling you, but this family has always. Sandra. I kept my voice even. I have the closing documents from our 2019 purchase. I have the gift letter you signed. I have receipts totaling $14,000 from October. And I have spoken with a real estate attorney about the legal boundaries around this property. I'm not sharing this to be hostile. I'm sharing it so we're having an honest conversation." The line was very quiet. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. The warmth was gone. What was underneath it was something harder and much less certain. "I see," she said. "I'll talk to Marcus." "That's fine," I said. "Have a good Saturday, Sandra." Hung up. Sat with my coffee. Watched the light on the grass. Marcus called me 40 minutes later. His voice tight, asking what I had said to his mother. I told him exactly what I had said, word for word. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "She's really upset, Nadia." And I said, "Marcus, she called to schedule an event in my home. Without asking." Again, I told her no. That is not something I'm going to apologize for. Another long silence. And then, for the first time in 6 years of marriage, my husband said something I had needed to hear for longer than I realized. "You're right," he said quietly. "I'll talk to her." It was not a grand gesture. It was not a tearful apology or a dramatic declaration. It was 4 words, spoken quietly into a phone on a Saturday morning. But after 6 years of "she means well and that's just how she is and it was for family, Nadia." Those 4 words landed like something finally, solidly, settling into place. Within the following 30 days, Marcus transferred $7,100 into our joint household account. Half the feast cost, which we had agreed was fair given the joint card. Sandra did not come to our home in December. Or in January. The spare key. I discovered it in Marcus's desk drawer and asked directly for it back. He gave it to me without argument. I had the locks rekeyed the following week. $85. Best $85 I have ever spent. There was no screaming. No courtroom. No explosion. Just a woman who finally knew exactly where she stood. Legally, financially, and in her own home. And a mother-in-law who, for the first time, had to reckon with the fact that assumption has a limit. I still live in that house. The cream and sage rug is still there. The stain came out almost completely with professional cleaning. The navy apron my mother gave me hangs on its hook by the back door, where it has always hung. The filing cabinet in the home office still has its folder labeled house. Purchase documents, and I know every page in it by heart now. Marcus and I are still working on things. Slowly. Honestly. With a therapist we both actually chose this time. I don't know yet what the future of our marriage looks like, and I have made peace with not knowing. What I do know is that whatever comes next, I will not be invisible inside it. Here is what I want to leave you with. The moment you understand your own position clearly, legally, financially, emotionally, is the moment no one can move you without your consent. Sandra didn't lose power the day I confronted her. She lost it the night I sat at my desk at 2 a.m. and read every document in that folder until I understood exactly what was mine. Knowledge is not just power. It is protection. And you are allowed to protect yourself. Quietly, legally, completely, without apology and without permission. If you have ever been made to feel like a guest inside your own life, I hope this story reminded you of something important. That was never the truth about you. If this story stayed with you, if any part of it felt familiar, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to reclaim something that was quietly taken from you. And if you know someone who is still in the middle of what I was in the middle of, still absorbing, still excusing, still filing things away without acting on them, share this with them. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can offer another person is the simple proof that it is possible to come out the other side. New stories post every week. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is a good time. And if you want to go deeper, the link in the description connects you to more stories just like this one. Take care of yourself. You've earned it.